ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, happy Friday. I am calling in from Washington, DC. My name is Meredith Horowski. The pronouns I use are she, her, hers. I am a Senior Program Director at Code for America. Code for America works with government, community-based organizations to understand how technology and the principles of technology can help meet people's needs at all levels of government and community, both local, state, and federal. And I am joined by a colleague and a friend who's also sharing a co-chair seat with me from the Code for America perspective, and that is Michael Cowden. I want to invite him to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Cowden. I am the Director of Solutions Engineering at Code for America. And I've been working for the past few years or so in the criminal justice space, working on criminal clearance across about a dozen different states in the US. So I've spent a lot of time working on criminal justice systems and how they interoperate for the last few years. And I also have a background in telecommunications that dates back about 20 years or so in a past life. So I'm looking forward to getting more into this with all the folks here in the room.
My experience is as an organizer, as a campaigner. So Dave, when you were mentioning like bringing passionate people together, like that is exactly what I live for, and live for the different experiences that people bring, unpacking the ways in which those different experiences can be in dynamic tension with one another. And I'm so glad that we have the foundation for that in this discussion, because we're going to need that if we're going to start to explore what's been done really well in this space and where do we have opportunities to collectively define what we want to address. So we're going to do actually fairly little speaking in this discussion and kind of ask you all some questions. Before we get into that, we want to say just a couple words about what the objectives of the technology working group is going to be in the coming months. So as you may know, we are one of 6 working groups exploring many facets of this issue. And the technology working group is going to work to kind of understand and examine technology and how it impacts the ability and capacity to ensure that people who are calling in to 911, that their needs are appropriately identified and met, and the right response is achieved at the right time. And again, we're going to be exploring what's working really well already within that system, and then what needs to be collectively addressed that we can take a look at from the lens of technology. I think one of the reasons I'm excited about this group, because as I understand it, 911 and calls into 911 is predicated on technology, being able to call 911 with the phone. That kind of infrastructure is technology. So for the good parts and the challenging parts of that, technology really is one core piece of the system. So I'm excited that you all are interested in exploring this together. Mike, I want to pass it over to you to say anything else about the kind of objectives of this group as you see them and the questions we'll be looking to explore in the coming months.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, so I think some of the other things we've had quite a bit of. I think there's a bit of like a fragmented system out there in terms of like the CAD systems and other systems that are involved in 911 process. I think a big part of this is going to be understanding across fire, EMS, and police services across all the different PSAPs that we see across the US. What are some commonalities and what are some capabilities that we see in those systems that we can use and leverage in order to provide different ways of responding in more human ways to respond in some ways. So I think that's the primary goal of this, and we can dig into some of the other details as we move forward.
Okay, so I promised that we would do fairly little speaking in this conversation and hear from you. So I want to pivot to that because I know there's so much knowledge in the room related to this topic, so much interest and energy. So we have a couple questions that we would like you all to engage with. And the first one is, if in the future 911 was truly transformed, truly set up to meet each caller's needs with the right response at the right time, what words would come to mind in that kind of reimagined future? I believe there is a Is our technology working? I think if you click the link, yeah, if you click that Mentimeter link in the chat, you'll be able to enter a few words and we'll see what comes up. More funding. I feel like it's appropriate that that's first on the list. Oh, this is cool. Understanding, efficient, interoperability, key one. Better outcomes. Let's give it a few more minutes. Think about the words that would describe a system that is able to meet every caller's need at the right time. Equitable, see that one rising pretty strongly. Equitable, responsive, interoperability, emerging as key themes here. People-centered. Mike, I want to invite you to reflect on any themes that are emerging for you as you look at these words. And then I'm going to do the same thing for participants. I'm going to invite a couple of folks to reflect on what you're seeing here. Mike, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So as I look at this, yeah, I see interoperability, responsiveness, equitable, and I just think about how do these all tie together. Open standards is another one I see, people-centered, and it seems it seems also that there are. Sorry, it looks like we just lost that. That there are a couple of different, that this kind of goes into a couple of different buckets. So one is maybe just the efficiency of services that are provided, and then the other is needs-based, trauma-informed. Some of these others are around kind of the flexibility of services that can be offered. I think open standards, interoperability, all those things are kind of tie into that. That's the first thing that jumps out at me. But I'll keep looking here and see if anything else comes to mind.
I'm looking for some that maybe require a little bit more voiceover, or for us to double click on them, as we say sometimes. Seeing like trauma-informed, well-connected, better outcomes, dependable. Anyone who threw words along those lines in this multimeter want to speak to those?
Hi, Marlita.
Hi, Marlita. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I actually didn't say trauma-informed, and I'm like, man, I want to go back and put it in there so it'll be bigger. But I like the fact that that's in there, because in the work that we've done in Chicago in convening providers, including staff from 911 call center, this notion of the burden of taking in so many crisis calls and needing to have a way to recover themselves, as well as keep providing that care and support. I just think that's such an important issue.
Thank you, Marlita, for giving some voice to that. I see interoperability here pretty strongly. I want to invite anyone to speak to that, whether you put this word here or not. What does this mean to you, particularly in the context of a system maybe 10 years from now, where it's kind of functioning in a way that we might hope that meets people's needs?
This is Chantel Oliver. I'll speak to that.
Great.
Well, when I think of interoperability, one system that connects multiple systems. For instance, a CAD connecting to the radio, that's also connecting to maybe your city systems. So all systems being able to talk to each other. That's what I meant by when I put interoperability.
Great.
But I can add something. This is Jerry.
Please, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
Hi, thanks. I see it as a system where we, if somebody calls and the operator can discern more accurately if the person needs a mobile crisis response team that has a clinician and a peer specialist only, or if it's something that might require a police officer. And I think that's going to be the holy grail here, is if we can get them as employees of the criminal legal system to make that decision, because this is going to dramatically affect the staffing needed at both sides of that spectrum.
Hi, this is Kelly Hall. I'm out of the Dallas area. To me, interoperability with the 911 system means that when I get a call from someone here and they want to speak to 911 in Chicago, I'm able to transfer it to 911 in Chicago. It's imperative we have a nationwide system where the EZNet up and running and we're all connected.
And Kelly, Chantel, Jerry, what do you, or others, what do you see as the current barriers, particularly from a technology perspective, for that interoperability to work?
Funding.
Well?
Money.
Yeah. Tell us more.
Funding.
For those folks who may be coming into this fairly new, like, tell us a little bit more about the funding piece. I mean, of course, more resources, but what other elements might you pull out of the resourcing challenge?
I can speak to Texas again. Our House signed a bill this year to use some of the ARPA funds that were coming from the federal government to fund a statewide EZNet next gen 911 network. Now they're hearing how much it's going to cost, and they're going, whoa, 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 do we really need this? Are we sure we want to do this? So it's not a matter, I mean, we've got it, we have to do it. We're all operating off of a system that was built in the 60s. That, we've got equipment that's degrading and going to eventually just quit working. So funding is an imperative part of it, unfortunately, that our legislators have to step up and do.
Yeah. I think that's such an important point, because it's a demonstration that some of these challenges are at the systems level and policy level, and it's a responsibility of both policymakers as well as practitioners, as well as people who interact with the system to encourage that we better resource these systems as a whole.
As well as private vendors, the cell companies and stuff have a big piece of it.
Yep. Yeah. I imagine that topic.
So
Can I
this
suggest to you that I'm sorry, I'm the leg here. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to touch on the financial piece too. And I don't know if you guys have started working or talking, if you're truly interested in interoperability and things like that FirstNet is a company or the agency that has been assigned and given quite a bit of money, and they're working pretty hard on these type of initiatives.
Thank you, Karen, for calling that out. I think that's something else this group will want to explore. Who are the different players in this space currently, and what are they doing well? And again, where are there gaps that need to be filled? So that may be a good segue into our next question for this group, which is, what burning questions would you want answered by this technology working group in the coming year? I think we have a similar multimeter structure, so you'll be able to write those in this cool piece of technology.
And you may have to refresh your screen if you've left the Mentimeter up. You may have to refresh the screen for the second question.
our fast typers getting some in here. How will we normalize criminal justice and behavioral health data? Have we defined the universal issues that we are trying to fix? Great question. Where can the technology bring us? Top 3 most critical and impactful problems. How do we do this without advantaging those who are already privileged? Great question. What data are missing? What data do we have to drive meaningful change? Man, these are so good. Mike, I might hand it over to you to speak to any themes that you are seeing. And then similarly, we may ask folks in the audience to reflect on any of these questions that you're seeing from participants here in the room.
Right, sounds good. So let me, is there a way I can go scroll through this page, or?
I'm sorry, I'm driving, so you can send me up or down.
I'll take a look. Okay, let me take a look at what you've got here. So, so national standards are not needed just for interoperability, but also data analytics. So I think one of the things I'm also curious about here is I believe there may be another working group that is focused on data analytics. So am I correct in that, Matthew?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I believe there is actually one of the working groups is focusing on data and analytics.
Yep.
Okay, great. How do we get local, state, and federal governments to understand the need to provide the necessary technology? And I think obviously this ties back into the funding question. And the other one is that technology, I'm curious about this one. Technology usually isn't the problem. It's funding and policy issues that need to be fixed. Does anybody want to offer more on, because I think one of the things that I'm curious about is, are there ways we can do this within the existing framework and technologies that we have out there? And I'm curious, just more if somebody wants to share more on this particular one.
Yeah, Mike, this is Darren Riley. So I threw that out there. Really, everything is is being based on IP mesh networks over time. SE-nets, as you probably know, it's IP. I mean, we're all communicating to everyone. I'm just meeting you now, but if you give me your email address, I'll be able to send you a message.
Sure.
It's not really, but when you're looking at dealing with health, safety, and security of individuals, that's exactly what's involved is individuals. You sort of like in the healthcare system, you have HIPAA. Yeah. So who has access to that information? Maybe it was a call for service tied to a child or what have you. You can't just share that information back and forth and everyone has the ability to do that, right? So there's a lot of policies and procedures. And then at a local level, if you just look at states or counties, there's going to be legislative related things, an act and them is going to have certain rights and issues that have to be dealt with on the local level within their state or what have you. So there's a lot of policies and procedures that impact who can get what. Right? Make sense? It's
a very good point. It sounds like it's really, if I can repeat back, I mean, one part of it is just data access and privacy and how do we, and policies around that. And the other is just, and the fact that this goes down to legislation at a local level, which is a broad challenge to solve.
Yeah, who has rights to access data, share data, policies and procedures affiliated with that.
Yep.
Again, HIPAA would just be the, kind of the poster child of, the same thing.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
That's such a great insight. It reminds me, if you say, what is a high-tech company? Walmart is an incredibly high-tech company because it has an organizational technology that is super effective in allocating resources where they need to go. And I think when we think of technology, we so often think of having a supercomputer in the back room or something. And that's really, that's important, but that's often so much less important than we have procedures in place to use the information that we have in a very tactically smart way. So I really like that last point.
And then from a technology standpoint, videos really impacted a lot of the emergency response and recording of incidents, as you all know. But when you look at the video, especially if it's involving certain people's rights and rights, you know, there's a lot of redaction that has to go into the video, especially if children are involved. It's a massive task, right? Who can get that? How could it be shared and things of that nature?
There's another one here, which is in yellow. Yeah, what are the most important problems to solve with the 911 ecosystem to be people-centered and trauma-informed? Let's be clear about the problems we're trying to solve before tech solutions. And I think, so I think this is a really important one. And I'm wondering what folks' thoughts are on the fundamental problem we're trying to solve up front. I can start with one that comes to my mind is the first thing that I think about when I think about this is how can we have more flexibility in, you know, where we route calls and who we dispatch for different for different natures of calls, and how do we address that, right? So I don't know if folks have thoughts here. I've been reading through, you know, the CAD specifications to see what types of features are out there. And it seems like there's definitely ways to do this. And I'm curious, how much of a technical challenge is this more broadly for folks who've been working in this industry for a longer amount of time?
So this is Karen Sutherland, and I work at Scottsdale Police Department in Arizona. I've been in the field for 39 years, and the technology exists to do probably more than we even know at this point. But new CAD systems do have some of these technological advances. But as we talked about earlier, it's always going to come down to money for the departments. And they have to make those decisions based on what may they have available to them and what they can justify to the citizens of their city, and where the priorities lie might not always be where we want it to be.
And just out of curiosity, is that money spent on administrative changes, policy changes, on configuring these systems, on the actual personnel? Are we talking about the personnel who are going to be responding?
I'm actually talking about the systems themselves.
The systems. Okay.
Yeah, the CAD systems themselves can be quite pricey, and annual costs and maintenance, and then the technology folks that we have to employ to keep those updated and keep all of the new technologies and integrations into them. It can easily come up to, even for a mid-sized department, over $1 million a year. And so that kind of money for most local agencies, they get what they can, and they may be able to get some of the bells and whistles, but it would be difficult for us to mandate that for all departments.
I see. Chad, you had a question?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Karen's saying, because I'm just to the south of her. And what I added on in one of my enlightening opportunities to learn this last year has just been how wildly expensive and how wildly underfunded emergency communications departments are, because it's just not recognized as part of a legitimate part of the public safety team. And just one working console with the hardware and the technology associated for one of our team members can cost $15,000 to $20,000. And also at a state level, where we're all supported in Arizona by a collected state tax, which is around 70 cents per phone line, when it should be about $1.20 per phone line, that would generate state funding for us. They don't have the capacity to support training consoles. So recently in Tucson, we had to work really hard to get over $1.6 million just to actually stand up a legitimate training center that our folks would support their growth through our training program.
Would you mind repeating the amount, the cost per line? It sounds like there's an overall startup cost, but then there's a cost per line for these.
There are, so as Karen was saying, there's the hardware equipment cost, and then there's the technology that's associated to that, both from computers to the radio to the workspace that they actually work at 10 to 12 hours a day. But that can range anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 for that complete structure that one team member needs to work.
Jerry, I see you listed next.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question. It seems like one of the biggest challenges is going to be the discernment of the operator of if it's a mental health related issue or crime related issue, or conflation of both, and should they dispatch a crisis response team or the other team, and it seems, or a police team. So it seems like that's an opportunity for AI, which is concerning because the potential for bias to be further ingrained in the system. So that challenge is going to be pretty big, I think.